Hi all, I'm Sandy Warner with Warner Realty Group in Newport, and today we're going to be talking with Adam Thayer of Sayer, Regan and Thayer, and we're going to talk about sort of a growing phenomenon in buyer contracts, at least in our area. We're talking to you from Newport, Rhode Island. We work greater Rhode Island, parts of Massachusetts, parts of Connecticut. We're seeing this a lot, so I'm assuming it's happening across the country. So please join me in saying hello to Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
So, Adam, you did a really great talk at a breakfast meeting that you and I went to for Newport County Board of Realtors, and you brought up what I thought was a great topic, and I asked you here today to come and talk about it, and it's this phenomenon of filling out a purchase and sales agreement in Rhode Island where you say that inspections are for informational purposes only. And I, for one, and you know I'm an attorney, and I kept going, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You have to cap what you're going to do, or you have to say no inspections, or what does that mean? And lo and behold, you bring it up at the breakfast meeting. And so I was so excited. I thought it was just me that couldn't wrap my head around how to handle that. So why don't you talk about why is that language a problem?
Okay, so I sound like a psycho when I talk about this, and I feel like lots of people roll their eyes because it's like one of these things that I'm just like obsessed with, because I see it all the time. And so let's just play, a little fact pattern out. So a bunch of offers come in on a competitive property, and a buyer's agent wants their offer to go to the top of the pile. And so one of the ways that they try to do that, try to protect their buyer while still trying to make that offer seem a little bit better, is they'll say inspections for informational purposes only. Now, I don't see this as much in some of the other states I practice in, like Mass, because Mass has a whole different offer and purchase and sale process. But in the Rhode Island system, where we go straight to the purchase and sales agreement, I see it. And what I think most people mean is that the buyer is agreeing they will not try and come back to the seller and ask for closing cost credits, a sales price reduction, repairs, like, for lack of a better term, nickel and dime the seller.
And they all say that, right? They use that language. We're not going to nickel and dime. Like, well, what does that mean?
Exactly. It's super subjective, okay, which is already a problem, right? Subjectivity is something we don't want in contracts. We want objectivity, okay, so that there's no possibility for a disagreement. And right there, even just use the phrase, what's nickel and diming to one person is not nickel and diming to the other. Right there, you're immediately introducing subjectivity. That's a no-no. And so the issue that I have with this is that the seemingly splitting of this, I'm not going to renegotiate, but I retain my right to terminate if I'm ultimately not happy with the result of the inspections, is an incorrect understanding of what this actual clause means. So in a normal deal, if a buyer goes to a seller and requests, I don't know, the roof get repaired or something like that, the only reason the buyer can even ask that is because they retain the right to terminate if the seller says no. Otherwise, why would a seller ever agree to it, right? If there's no inspection contingency and the buyer says, I want the roof repaired, the seller's going to say, go pound sand, unless they've lost their mind. So those two rights, your right to renegotiate and your right to terminate, are the same right. It's two sides of the same coin. Right. You can't have one without the other. So to say that I'm going to retain my right to terminate but not renegotiate doesn't make any sense. First of all, let's just talk it through normally. In a normal situation with an inspection contingency, if a buyer says, I want X, Y, and Z done, seller, the seller can always say no.
Right.
So what I believe this clause is meant to say is that the seller has no obligation to renegotiate ticky-tack stuff or nickel and diming, whatever you want to call it. But the seller already has that right. They can always say no. So right there, this clause is not really changing the legal rights and responsibilities of the parties. Again, if we assume what I've stated is the intent here, that they can terminate but they can't renegotiate, that clause is not actually, that already is the situation, right? And the seller already has the right to say no. So adding this clause right now, as we've kind of discussed here, all it's really doing is introducing an element of subjectivity, which creates the possibility of disagreements. Okay.
So to dumb it down, let me just back you up 1 second. To really dumb this down, I think it's really important for an agent or a buyer or whoever is using this clause to understand that the clause as it's written if you can, yes, you have an inspection period. Yes, you can go do an inspections, and then you can take your report and you can make requests. The fact that you're making requests does not mean that the seller has to do them. So the seller has three options. When you make your request, they can say, yes, I'll do all of them. No, I'll do none of them. Or they'll try to renegotiate with you and give you somewhere in the middle. So by saying, and all of that has to be done within 10 days. And within that 10 days, the only one that has any power is the buyer. The buyer can walk away based on the inspection or based on no reason. The seller only has the power to say yes or no. By saying this, and this is what I think you're saying, Adam, by saying, oh, we're doing it for informational purposes, you're trying to say that you're trying to make the seller think that you're waiving your right to walk away, but that's not what you're doing.
Exactly. Well, so I can see a seller interpreting it that way, reasonably. Yeah. I can see a seller reasonably interpreting it that way. And I'm not aware of any litigation that has gone to the level of a court decision that would have like what we call like a reported decision, where we can look at it and say, well, the Supreme Court in Rhode Island found this, and this is how they interpreted this phrase. I'm not aware of that happening yet. So in the absence, we, as attorneys or realtors, have to somehow kind of make a common sense decision as to how we think a judge or jury, in the unlikely event that this went to a full-blown trial, would interpret something like this. And the fact that there's an ambiguity, and I think you could have at least a reasonable debate over what that clause meant, is problematic. Yeah. Whether it's this clause or any clause. I mean, the whole point of the current inspection contingency in the contract, when that came out, I think in January 1st of 2014, people lost their minds. There was an NCBR breakfast at the hotel across the street from the former Atlantic Beach Club. I forget what it was called at that point in time. But all the realtors were freaking out because they said, well, wait a minute. The current one that we have now, the buyer gets to terminate for any reason during the first 10 days. Okay? And everyone said, this is so buyer-friendly. Well, the give and take there, the problem with the old one was that the old inspection contingency said a buyer had to find a materially deficient condition to terminate. Well, what is that? What's materially deficient to person A is not materially deficient to person B. We were involved in a big litigation over a radon mitigation system. Okay? Was that materially deficient? Who knows? Yeah. So what buyer tried to do was remove the subjectivity. The pro-buyer section of it was the buyer gets 10 days, okay, and then get out for basically any reason or no reason. The seller-friendly side was, in Rhode Island, which is not a time is of the essence state, we're going to make this section time is of the essence. It's a firm 10 business days. That's it. They don't get out after that, then they're in. And that was the give and take. The whole point was to remove the subjectivity. And now this clause, which has sprung up like a weed in every deal, has now reintroduced subjectivity into that clause, which is supposed to be black and white.
Yep.
And I've got into knockdown, drag-out fights with other attorneys here about it, and I tell them, explain to me how I am wrong. Don't just tell me that you think I'm being an idiot or I'm younger than you, so I don't know what I'm talking about or whatever it is. If you explain to me why I'm wrong, I will admit it, and good. Then I'm wrong. Then everybody who's doing it this way is right, and I am wrong. Great.
Yeah.
But thus far, that has not happened. And so I'm concerned that it's only a matter of time before I start seeing litigation involving these clauses, where there's a misunderstanding between the parties. And then what's going to happen? The client's going to be upset, and they're going to look to who their advisors were in the real estate transaction, the realtor and the lawyer, and say, how could you have let me do this? Why did you draft it this way? Yep.
Yeah. So, and why, if you're the seller, why did you allow me to accept that? Why didn't you explain to me that it didn't change anything? We did have one where they said they actually used the language, and it's an experienced realtor here in town, and it really highlighted it for me. But their language said, we will not use the results of the inspection to alter or renegotiate the P&S in any way. So they did have that clause. We want to use it for informational purposes, but will not use any of the results to alter or renegotiate the P&S. They did not give up their right of waiver.
Right, and so see, to that point, I would ask that realtor, explain to me how that clause in any way changes the legal rights and responsibilities of the parties in this purchase and sales agreement.
Well, I think it took out. The only thing I would say on that one is it took out some of the question. They're either going to walk away or stay. Right then, I think the practical effect of that language is it dramatically shortened the inspection period, and they handed us a check on that day. So
and so what I have encountered is that this phrase has become so ubiquitous that even if you're somebody like me who's a nutball and disagrees with its use, you can't escape it.
Yeah.
So you have to make the best of using it. And so qualifying language like that, like I had to deal with an agent recently who was like, Adam, I have to use this. Otherwise, I'm not even going to get my foot in the door. So I said, fine, you can put that, but you need to put some sort of qualifying language that further fleshes that out that says, yes, we agree, whatever, that we're not going to renegotiate. But we still agree, everyone still agrees that we retain our right to terminate.
Mm-hmm. Because
that is the key thing. I mean, that is the golden ticket for your buyer. If for some reason it's determined that they have waived that, even inadvertently, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars on an E&O claim or something very bad.
Yeah.
So to pivot slightly, there are hypothetically scenarios where this phrase makes sense. They're incredibly rare, and even when they make sense, I still don't like them. So I had a realtor bring a deal to me, and she represented the seller. The buyer was a house flipper, and they said, listen, truly for informational purposes only. I mean, they waived their right to terminate, but they said, can we still go in there because we want to get in there day one and just start, knocking down walls and doing whatever we need to do because we need to flip this as fast as possible. So can we get in there and do this informational purposes only inspections? Again, they had waived their right to terminate. Hugely important. In that scenario, I'm like, wow, those inspections truly are for informational purposes only. Yeah, unbelievably rare. I mean, 2% times that I see this phrase. And so that agent said, Adam, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, I'm going to use this example, and every time I talk about this from now on, number one. But number two, why would you agree to let them in?
Yeah.
So in our, the typical custom of the way it goes in Rhode Island is $1,000 deposit down, and then usually the balance of the 5% deposit at some point thereafter. So usually $1,000 up front, and then some five-figure sum, maybe something like that, depending on the value of the property, maybe six. At some point in the next couple of weeks, you're getting that balance. And so I would be very, very cautious, only having the $1,000 and then letting somebody into that house to do an inspection, even if they've waived their right to terminate, because if they then back out of that deal and don't send you that second deposit, the lion's share of it. Your seller is not going to want to sue them for that, and they're going to look at you like, why did you let me do this? So if you have a scenario where you have this hypothetical, it makes sense, informational purposes only, that's fine, but you want that entire deposit before anybody's stepping foot in that house and doing like a radon test, testing the foundation, anything substantial, because otherwise you're in essence giving somebody $1,000, assuming that's the initial deposit, $1,000 right of first refusal on the property.
Mm-hmm.
They begin like $1,000 first sniff.
Yeah.
And in our market, many of these houses that are so hot and they're just flying off the shelves, people in a certain wealth class or professional house flippers are willing to pay $1,000 for a first look at a property.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be on, even in that rare scenario where it might make sense, there still is a very big pitfall there.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great tip. I don't know that I would have thought of that because we just don't do a lot of flippers, right? And if you're not doing this every day, it'd be really easy to overlook that and be like, oh my God, what did I do?
And honestly, it's not like I wasn't born knowing it. I was involved in a deal where this exact thing came up.
Yeah.
And the realtor for the seller said, I will let you in to do all these. It was a radon was the big issue. Radon inspection, but I want the remainder of that 5% before you step foot in that house. Because he was worried. He knew these people would have no problem walking away from the initial $1,000.
Smart realtor.
Totally.
Yeah. Fantastic, Adam. Thank you so much. So if an agent out there is listening to this going, oh my God, I need help, how do they get a hold of you?
Give my office a call, 401-849-3040, or shoot me an email, first initial last name, that's ATHAYER at SRT-law.com.
And why don't you tell us what law firm you work with and what you specialize in? I didn't think we even talked about that.
Sure, yeah. Thayer, Thayer. My office is in Newport. We got a satellite office in Wakefield, Rhode Island. I'm licensed in Mass, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. We're doing, 1,000, 1,500 closings a year right now. We do commercial, residential, and I just applied to become an SBA designated attorney, so I do quite a bit of 504 and SBA lending as well. And then my office is a full-service office, so estate planning, probate, immigration, civil litigation, family law, any of that kind of stuff. We do it all.
Fantastic. And of course, you don't do it all by yourself, or you would never go home.
Oh, no. Thank God we have 8 real estate paralegals right now. It's crazy.
Okay.
We have a very great team here. Everybody's pretty much friends. We only threaten to kill each other once every other week. But we have an awesome staff here. I'm friends with everybody here. We have a great working environment. So anything like that, I'm the only one licensed in Connecticut, so I do the business law and real estate out there. But pretty much anything else you could possibly need, Mass and Rhode Island, we do. And then we also do the real estate and business law in Connecticut as well.
Fantastic. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I hope we get a chance to talk to you again soon. And I hope some agents know that you're a great resource and that you are heavily involved with the Newport County Board and that you're always offering great advice. And I hope we can talk to you again soon.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me. Anytime.
Thanks, Adam.